What's up, guys? So got a little bit of an interesting project here today. We've got a 2010 335D. We're going to be doing an emissions delete, which will get rid of the diesel particulate filter that comes off of the turbochargers, swirl flap delete, and an EGR cooler delete as well. This is pretty common on these cars because really the only problem that these diesel cars have is all the emission stuff goes bad. The active tank, the passive tank, the EGR cooler. Those things are super common failure points on these cars, and deleting them, although illegal, keeps you from being stranded, broke down, stuff like that. After you do a delete like this, you have to have a tune done to it to turn all of the monitors off for all of these systems that we're taking off. I'm not capable of doing that. The guy that owns the car is actually going to take it to a shop that's going to tune all that stuff out after I get done with it. So this video is just going to encompass me removing all of the parts off of the car for the emissions stuff, and we're also going to be putting on a new harmonic damper. These cars are really bad for the harmonic damper itself. The rubber between the center part where it bolts to the crank and the outer part where the belts ride will separate, and it'll cause the crank to spin but not spin the accessories that are driven by the belt drive. So car's got 100,000 miles on it. We're just going to be doing the harmonic balancer. Also, while we have the intake manifold off, we're going to be doing a set of glow plugs and the glow plug controller. That's also a common failure point on these cars. It's not so much a repeated thing. It kind of, as the glow plugs get worn out, they go bad. So at 100,000 miles, odds are it's probably going to have a problem here soon if we don't replace it. So while we have the intake manifold off, we're going to replace the glow plugs as well. Alright guys, I just wanted to give you a breakdown of all the parts involved with doing this. This is an intake manifold that the owner of the car actually had hot tanked and cleaned to get all the carbon buildup out of the inside of it. These cars are real bad for carbon buildup with the EGR cooler still on them. That's what causes the carbon buildup. Once we delete that off the car, that will no longer be a problem. We're going to see when we get in there how bad the carbon buildup is in the head. We don't have the tools with us today to actually do a carbon blasting on this. So if it is bad enough, I'm going to let him know, and we'll probably set up a date in the future to do a carbon blasting on it. I just wanted to show you also that he already previously installed all of the swirl flap delete. So there's swirl flaps in this intake manifold that vary whether or not these intake runners are open to flow air into the engine. It's an emissions thing for clean burning, and as well as just to make sure that it's meeting emissions. You delete that just because they get stuck, they get gummed up, they break. I've seen them break apart and fall into the engine, and that doesn't turn out to be a good thing. So we do a swirl flap delete. These are just plates that block off all the holes where the swirl flaps go. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We have new intake gaskets. We're also going to be doing an EGR cooler delete, which this plate blocks off the EGR where the EGR comes off of the exhaust manifold. These block off the two coolant lines that come out of the engine that are for the EGR cooler. And then also this valve delete here deletes the valve that's normally in this intake system that allows the EGR cooler to flow through. This is just a delete plate that eliminates that from the system. We're also going to be doing a downpipe on this car, which is to replace the diesel particulate filter. I've not seen any of those really cause problems, but it's a restriction in the exhaust, and if you're going to tune the car and try to get more power out of it, you might as well take that out of there. We're also going to be doing a silicone coupler on the upper part of the intake hose, where intake hose comes off of the intercooler and onto the throttle body. Where this goes onto the throttle body, you put this coupler on there, because these are bad for the plastic that's at the end of that thing blowing off when you have tuned cars and breaking the end of that plastic off. So this coupler will fix that problem. New harmonic balancer, like I said, the rubber insert here in the middle has a tendency to deteriorate and come apart and cause the center part to still spin because the engine's running, but it doesn't transfer that to the outside ring where the belts drive, and then you'll have charging system faults and you know, potentially could come apart completely and fling the outer pulley off with the belts and everything and cause other kinds of damage. So while we're in there, due to the mileage of the car, we're going to replace this. Glow plug controller. These tend to go bad when the glow plug goes bad. I don't really know what causes that. I think it just causes a short circuit inside of the glow plug controller itself, and it'll fry the circuit board inside of it. And then we have 6 glow plugs that we're going to replace at this time as well. So what I want to show you guys is the stuff that's got to come off in order to get this intake manifold off. So you're going to have to pull this intake boot back. What I do, I'm pretty sure it's probably the only way to do it, is you pop this clip out and pull the tube back. But what happens is if you get in here, look, if the clip's popped out all the way, like this, it's going to hit that EGR temp sensor. So what you do is you pull the hose back until it's off and then push the clip back in, and then you can pull the hose off all the way. Undo this plug connection, undo your EGR temp sensor, push that off to the side. Swirl flap motor, undo that. You have a plug connection right here that you have to unplug. This is your manifold pressure sensor. There's a 10mm in this bracket for this dipstick tube that you're going to have to take off. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 11mm nuts, and then all of these 10s across the top. There's a bracket right here that goes underneath the third from the back bolt. That is a bracket that holds down that engine cover that goes over the top of the back here. So now that you got all that stuff off, I still have to get this 10 off of here. After you do that, you can pull the intake manifold off, and I'll show you guys what everything looks like, the intake manifold off and glow plugs, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, so this is what this engine looks like with the intake manifold taken off of it. As you can see, there's square ports here in the side of the head, no different than a regular intake manifold. It's a little bit different with this engine is it has these circle ports up here that are in the valve cover. They should go through the valve cover and down into the head from up top. That's what the swirl flaps actually go through. It creates a circular rotation in the engine and in the cylinder when it's filling with air to help create a complete burn so that you don't have unburned hydrocarbons or diesel fuel, I guess, as you would say, being dumped into the exhaust. It helps create a clean burn. It's an emissions thing. You can delete the swirl flaps and it doesn't really affect anything because then the intake just flows evenly through both of these and it's not shut off at any point in time because the swirl flap actuator, that thing's completely deleted along with the flaps themselves. Reason for doing that is the flaps break off. I've never seen one break off. I've heard of them breaking off. They also get gummed up and stuck, and then the motor actuates them, but they're not actually opening, so you're not getting full airflow through the engine. What you notice is I talked about these ports being carboned up. The reason the customer had that intake manifold ready for me was because these can get so carboned up that you can barely fit your pinky in through this hole. So as you can see, they're actually really, really good. I'm kind of surprised. It's probably been done before. I would guess probably this car's got 97,000 miles on it. They probably were done around 60. So as you can see, they started to gum back up again. I'm going to tell the customer not to worry about it because with the tune and the swirl flap delete, it'll probably end up blowing what little is there back out. Not too concerned about it. I wanted to show you guys too, I forgot to tell you, on the back of the intake manifold, there's another connector underneath. It's kind of hard to see actually. This is actually your swirl flap motor. I was incorrect before when I told you that this is a swirl flap motor. This is actually your EGR valve, which will be getting deleted in the new system with that EGR like spacer plate. And then this is your throttle body. So the throttle body is going to then bolt onto the EGR spacer plate that we've got that's on the new intake manifold. On the other side, since I'm going to show you guys, these are actually your swirl flaps right here. You see this flap right here inside the intake manifold. It closes it off. There's a rod here that runs all the way down, and then this actuator here actuates the rod side to side, and it closes these flaps off. These are the square ports in the cylinder head, and it closes these off when it needs to or when it deems it's necessary. It'll open them back up to create a swirl in that cylinder to help create complete fuel burning. We're going to do glow plugs on this car. Glow plugs are right here. All these little plug connections here, all the glow plugs. Your glow plug controller is actually down there underneath the coolant hose. It's kind of a pain to get to, but it's got two 10s holding it to a bracket down there, and we're going to get that replaced while we're in here. Another thing is you need a special socket to take the glow plugs out. This is the socket. It is a 12.10mm socket, but it's got this relief area cut in here into the socket to allow the tip of the glow plug to protrude into there and not bottom out in the back of the socket. I would think that probably like a deep 12.10 would probably work. I've never tried it because I always had access to this socket, so I'm not too you know, I don't know if that a regular 10mm socket 12 point will work. So we're gonna get the glow plugs replaced, and I'll show you guys the process of doing that as well. Alright, I wanted to show you guys the process of doing this glow plug. Look at this connector right here. There's a tab here on the side of it. There's one on the other side too. You just grab that end of this, pinch those tabs in, and it pulls the connector off. Set your connector off to the side. Break your glow plug loose. Usually not that tight. As you can see, I'm able to do it by hand. Pull your old glow plug out. So all of these glow plugs that I had look exactly like this. They're all like white and charred on the end, except for one on cylinder 1. Check engine light's on in this car. When I started working on it, I never checked to see what the fault was. When we're all done, I'm gonna see what it is. I have a feeling it's probably for one of these glow plugs. So we'll see at the end of everything. Then you just take your new glow plug, set it back down in your cylinder back there, your little hole in the engine. Screw it back in. And tighten it down. I don't know what the torque spec is for these. I just kind of snugged them up a little around as tight as they were when I took it out. And then your glow plug connector goes back on and gets pushed on until you hear it click. It's a very light click noise, but you'll hear it and you'll feel it in your finger too when you're pushing it back on there. So now we're gonna get this glow plug controller down here underneath the coolant hose replaced. That's not gonna be fun. Alright guys, old glow plug controller out. Don't really look like anything's wrong with it. It's kind of hard to tell by looking at them if they're bad. I mean, there's nothing to see, and you can't get inside of them because they're like plastic welded to this aluminum plate on the back. The new one is down in there. As you can see, it's right here. This is it right here. It's not fun to get to. As you can see that 110 that holds it on, but on the other side, it's kind of buried. You got to pull some hoses back out of the way and stuff like that. And then the connectors down on the bottom down here are, they're in a really bad spot. They're kind of bound up a little bit. They make like a 90-degree angle to go into the bottom of the glow plug controller. And you have to like unclip them, undo the screws that hold the glow plug controller to that plate, and then pull the glow plug controller back off of the studs and then pick it up off of the connectors. It's like the only way to get them on. And then when you go back together, you have to set the controller back down onto the connectors, tip the glow plug controller onto the studs, and then pull the connectors back up till they click back in. It's kind of a pain. That's just to doing that way, just so you don't screw up the wiring, because like I said, it's making like a 90-degree angle. If you push them down too far, you potentially break the wiring or the insulation and cause yourself other problems. So we're all done with the glow plugs and the controller. We're gonna get this intake manifold put back on, the new one, not the one that I pulled off. It's actually the one that has this rough up delete and the EGR delete. So let's get to it. All right, so we got the intake manifold put back in. Put your new manifold pressure sensor in. Make sure you plug your connector back in here for the fuel rail pressure sensor. Actually, I think that's the quantity control valve, and this is the fuel pressure sensor and the fuel rail. Put all your nuts back on those studs. Tighten down all those screws. Make sure you put your little bracket back on the third screw from the back. So this connector right here will no longer be used because that was for the EGR valve. This plug connection here goes to this. You're not going to have to worry about the EGR temp sensor or the EGR. This will come off with the EGR cooler.